Adrian Saunders, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and from the Honorable Justice Dennis Byron, a member and judge of that same court, because he joined him. Both Justice Byron and myself had the distinct pleasure to have served in St. Lucia, both as trial judges and on the Court of Appeal. We therefore had the good fortune to acquaint ourselves with the inimitable Kenneth Foster QC of blessed memory. We actually got to hear about him and his prowess as a criminal lawyer many years before we actually met him, when he was recruited to lead the defense team in one of the most sensational trials that ever took place in Trinidad. We got to know him in his later years. A more polite, convivial counsel is hard to imagine. He pursued his client's cases always with a smile on his face, and whether you agreed with him or not, whether he was or was not successful, that smile and charm was ever present. It was so exquisitely Kenneth that on one occasion, he took off his jacket to lend a member of Justice Byron's family to fully cover her shoulders to attend a ceremonious sitting of the court. Out of court, he was an excellent raconteur with a wealth of good advice for everyone. Bar St. has lost a legend. Our condolences go out to all the members of his family. I will now invite the Right Honorable Sir Dennis Byron, former President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, to deliver his tribute to Mr. Kenneth Foster.
Testing, am I being heard?
Yes, louder.
Your leadership? It has been many years since I have stood on this side of the bench in a courtroom or court sitting. And I'm grateful to the Bar Association for inviting me to share in this special sitting, and your leadership for affording me the opportunity to address you. I can safely assure you, however, that I'll be mindful of the requirements imposed upon me for brevity and relevance, and knowing how many other speakers will be speaking, I will try to avoid repetition and redundancy. I learned with sadness about the passing of the late learned Kenneth Foster QC after a long illness. It made me immediately remember him when he was young and vital. I first met him more than 40 years ago, before I joined the bench in 1982, when he had expanded his practice to the northern Leeward Islands in the British Virgin Islands. In those days, he cut a dashing figure and had a flamboyant personality. It was well known that he did not like to fly and would only travel by boat. Yet he kept the practice alive for quite some time, as he demonstrated his legal diversity in both criminal and civil law. This was very enlightening, because by that time he had become regionally famous as a leading criminal lawyer. and was internationally known for his defense in the famous trial of Abdul Malik in Trinidad. So we celebrate today a man who had become a legal luminary across the Caribbean. Peter Foster-QC, and the late Marcus Foster, who sadly deceased his father. My lady, I crave your indulgence to extend my sympathy and condolences to them, and to the entire and extended family. I know that even though we all knew that his mortality was imminent, it is still inevitable that as he transitions from these earthly realms to his eternal home, they must be affected by grief. I pray that as they mourn, they will remember and be strengthened by the words of Matthew chapter 5 verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. My lady, regretfully, many of the members of the bench, purely because of the influx of time, and many of the younger members of the bar only knew our revered deceased by his reputation. He is probably one of the last of an era And I have to say one of, because sitting among us, we have learned Kenneth from QC, who has outlasted it. And he's also part of the same era of learned and distinguished pioneers who laid the foundation of the legal practice and the legal framework upon which our generations are building and growing. I trust that his memory will inspire the search for excellence at the bar and service to humanity. And so I offer the legal fraternity and the society at large my sincere condolences and sympathy on the passing of the stalwart who has completed the journey of life with distinction. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Sir Dennis. I will now call on the Honorable Ladyship Justice Kenneth and Prashad Charles.
Good morning, my lady. May I adopt the protocol list which has already been established and to take judicial notice of Sir Dennis Byron and Mr. Kenneth Monplaisy, QC, the longest serving member of the St. Lucian Hall. I'm happy to be able to participate in these proceedings via Zoom from the Bahamas. It is also with profound sadness when I learned of the death of my dear friend. And today we are gathered here today to say goodbye to a son of the soil, a legal eagle, and a giant among men, the late Kenneth Foster, QC. I first met Kenneth Foster on my first day at work as Deputy Registrar of the High Court of St. Lucia, some 35 years ago. He was the first lawyer to walk into my humble chambers at the registry. And as Sir Dennis just alluded to, he was also the first lawyer to invite us to have lunch with his family. Later on, when I became a magistrate, he appeared in almost every magistrate court in the 1st and 2nd districts. He had a very good practice in those days. He was in every court representing every St. Lucian from all walks of life, be it the rich or the poor, the famous or the infamous, the innocent or the guilty. Kenneth never shirked from his duties to his clients and the court. He had a unique style of advocacy. When he had a good case, he was charming, pleasant, and cooperative. But when he had a bad case, he was the loudest. And then you see the other side of Kenneth. That said, he never disrespected the court. Kenneth was knowledgeable in the law, but criminal law was his forte and his passion. He represented his clients well. I recall an occasion when I was sitting as a magistrate in the magistrate court at Miku. I had about 30 or 40 cases in that day. Many lawyers were already there from 9 a.m., if not before. Kenneth came in late and bulldozed his way into getting his matter heard first before everyone, including the late Mr. Henry Girodi and the late Sir John Compton, who were there in the court. I don't know what he whispered to them, but they all agreed to him going ahead of them. That was the charm which he possessed and generated. And that day, Kenneth knew that his client had a bad case. So he was therefore more engaging and louder. Needless to say, he lost the case. And if you believe that the clients were upset, then you were dead wrong. Instead, they hugged and hailed him like their king. Later on, and that was some hours later as I was leaving the court, they were still outside discussing the case. I overheard his client saying, "Never mind Mitt loss, but he really fight for me and even give the magistrar a hard time." And that was Kenneth. He fought for his clients no matter how weak their cases were. He also always believed that he could impress the court with legal technicalities, which he did from time to time. I also recall the case popularly dubbed the Cathedral Murder. I was the presiding judge. The Crown brought in Mr. Tony Astaphan, senior counsel from Dominica, to prosecute their case, and I believe Sean Innocent, now Justice Innocent, was slated to represent the two defendants. Sean was very young, and since it was a very high-profile case, I wanted to have a level playing field, so to speak, so I called on Kenneth. At first he was adamant, but he eventually agreed, saying to me, "When Judy calls, never say no to a judge." He took on the challenge. He fought hard. He knew it was a difficult case. And the part that captivated me most, and I'll be brief, I understand time is of the essence, was when it came to the defendant's case. The defendants were pleading insanity. Kenneth allowed them to take the witness stand and tell their story as it was. Just to be brief, they went to the gas station up the morning, purchased gasoline in jerry cans, waited until dawn cracked, and when they heard the tolling of the cathedral bells, they rushed down, sprinkling gasoline on the worshippers and using a flambeau to set a few of them ablaze. A priest and a nun eventually died. The defendants told their story, and in addressing the jury, Kenneth stared at every juror in their eyes, and then he declared, "I told you they were mad because only mad people will confess." Kenneth was charming. He wooed juries. He strategized the makeup of the jury. He knew how to twinkle his eyes and charm them. He was a performer and an actor, and may have done very well on Broadway. Outside of the courtroom, Kenneth was a totally different person. He was an advisor, counselor, true friend, great storyteller, and an awesome dancer. He danced salsa better than most Latinos. I believe he passed on that talent to Hermes, one of his sons, who once was trying me to do the same, but my two left feet made it quite grueling for him. Kenneth was also a very practical man, down to earth and straightforward. Everyone knew where he stood with them, or where they stood with him. I believe that Kenneth can best be described in the words of Carl Sandburg, who said, and I quote, "Not often in the story of mankind does a man arrive on earth who is both steel and velvet, who is as hard as a rock and soft as drifting fog, who holds in his heart and mind the paradox of terrible storm and peace unspeakable and perfect," unquote. Kenneth Foster was also an advocate of great scholarship. His sterling contribution to Caribbean jurisprudence, which spanned nearly 6 to 7 decades, will continue to guide us, and his name will reverberate in the hollowed walls of our courtroom for many more decades to come. A friend of mine, on learning of Kenneth's death, described him as a masterpiece that cannot be replicated. This is so true. Who else travels to Tortola in a cruise ship whilst the court of appeal awaits his arrival? As Sir Dennis said, he had a phobia for flying, and I believe heights also. I pride myself as being an honorary member of the foster family. So whenever I was in St. Lucia, I will call up Ella Shillingford, and wherever Kenneth was, I'll pay him a visit. I last saw him about 2 years ago at Bishop's Gap. He was frail, but never lost the touch of how to hug and kiss, even in that feeble state. That was the Kenneth Foster that we all knew. On that occasion, I took beautiful pictures with him, which I shall cherish forever. To the entire Foster family, especially my dear friends Colin and Peter, my deepest sympathy. In your time of grief, you could be comforted by the fact that Kenneth ran a good and long race. He has left behind huge shoes to fill. He will be sorely missed. My family and I extend our deepest condolences, not only to the Foster family, but the entire nation. One more St. Lucian icon has departed the terrestrial bliss. May the soul of my dear friend rest in everlasting peace. Thank you so much, my lady, for indulging.
Thank you, Mrs. Shepard. I now invite Mr. Kenneth Watkins, CUTC, to address the court.
I'm not accustomed to hiding behind the scenes, speaking to people that you don't see. But this is the era that we live in, and may I adopt, therefore, the protocol that has already existed and for which you have already listened to. I last saw my friend, my lifelong friend, Kenneth Foster, towards the end of last year. Some time had elapsed before my previous visit. I enjoyed more regular visits when our mutual friend Susie Goben would arrive. I am terrified of negotiating the Bishop Gap Road. Too many cars parked, and the present intolerance of solutions have dissuaded me from driving there. I decided to ask Jano Walters to assist me with the transportation for a visit. He was very happy to accommodate, as I knew he would, because he affectionately calls me Dad. I'm yet to know why. He did come on the appointed day with Alberton Wishier. When we got there, Ken was sleeping, and on being awakened, looked at me in a daze, as it happens to one on waking up. Realizing I was the one, he shouted out, "Ken!" twisted and grabbed me to get up in a sitting position and hugged me with all his strength, which was surprisingly strong. He lay back and fell into an intermittent sleep while we spoke. Sitting at his bedside and realizing that his life was ebbing away, my thoughts turned to this vibrant man in his day, whom I had known for a long time. I remember as a young boy when he lived with his mother, Martha Alsey, in Marianne Street, not far from the Cannon Tree, which connected Chaussee Road, Marianne Street, and Coral Street like an electrical junction box, which location found favor with the Salvation Army weekly meetings with drums and shak-shak to accompany their prayer meetings and song. The Cannon was a convenient meeting place. Vincent Closack, who also lived in Marianne Street, Ken Foster, and the Walker brothers who live in Chaussee Road often convened there. My next awareness of Ken Foster was when he entered St. Mary's College. I was then in Form 3. It was only after the inter-school tournament in Grenada in 1947 that our friendship began to grow. We steadily grew from then, and increased after the Castries fire in 1948, no doubt through the connection of the Alsey family, who were also our friends. In practicing law in those days, one experienced insufferable hardship. Criminal assizes was held 3 times in a year: February, June, and October. There was the one and the same judge for both the criminal and civil jurisdictions. The difficulty was not the work in one's representation, but in the payment of fees, which at most times was hard and paid with kind, like animals, sheep, goats, and in serious cases, even cows. This was not surprising, as the business community was small and St. Lucia was the reservoir of a large peasant community. Sugar was failing and bananas had not yet started to influence the economy. Ken and I fared many times against each other in civil and criminal courts, as well as in the magistrate court. We battled furiously in court, but never allowed court proceedings to interfere with our friendship. I can recall on one occasion when we appeared on opposite sides with loud and aggressive displays. Justice Bishop was then presiding. Stop the case, call us into his chambers, and advise us to what he then termed pull it down. Ken's forte was criminal law, and his services at the bar in the criminal jurisdiction in St. Lucia, the Eastern Caribbean, as well as in Trinidad. These are well documented, and I have no doubt will be further expressed by others who will speak after me. He lived an active life, including time for a political career, during which time he took office as a minister of government. I got the feeling that Ken would have wished a conglomerate of fosters in a family of foster children, but it did not materialize. Nevertheless, he is fortunate to be able to witness a number of his offspring as lawyers. Kenneth Foster was a kind and generous disposition. Helped many people in his lifetime, as well as being faithful, generous, and attentive to all his children throughout his life. He lived an involved life and did it his way. May he rest in peace.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Mobley. You see, I now call upon Mr. Michael Gordon to address the board.
Your Ladyship, with your permission, I will adopt the salutations previously expressed. If I may be permitted to corrupt Hamlet, brevity is the soul, and he said wit, but I say sincerity. And tediousness, the limbs and outward flourishes. I will be brief. In 1967, when our dearly departed colleague had been a member of the St. Lucia Bar for nearly 10 years, I had the privilege of joining what was, in those days, a select band of some 19 practicing lawyers. Of course, because my books were newer and my studies more recent, I was quite sure that it would only be a matter of a short period of time before I was at the head of our noble profession. Such terrible arrogance. Fortunately, those who preceded me at the bar, and in particular, I call to mind the late Desmond McNamara, my friend who is with us, Mr. Kenneth Montplaisir, and two stalwarts who are no longer with us, Kenneth Foster and Henry Giroux. These four set about with great kindness and not a little humor, disabusing me of my baseless thoughts of ascendancy and imminent wanting success. I well remember on one occasion, early in my practice, Kenneth and I were representing two defendants in a traffic matter. I was both passionate and long-winded. I noticed that Kenneth made not a single note of what I thought to be a lesson in the art of cross-examination and submission in the law. I admit to being a little put off by this, but I made allowances on the basis that he would merely adopt my submission. When it was his turn to cross-examine witnesses for the prosecution, I was flabbergasted that this experienced counsel asked no question until it came to the evidence of the complainant police officer. And then he asked only one question and sat down. His question was, and did you serve the defendants with a notice of intended prosecution? The police officer had not served the required notice and said so. I saw Kenneth look up at the magistrate, who, if memory serves, was our departed colleague, Lorenzo Williams, who, again as I recall, suffered fools not at all. As Kenneth made the stand, but before he achieved the perpendicular, the magistrate declared, case dismissed, slammed his book, and got up and walked out. Kenneth sat back down to his chair and started to rearrange his papers prior to his departure. I had no idea of what had just taken place. And I said so to Kenneth. It was then that he leant over to me and very quietly said, check section 50 of the motor vehicles and road traffic order. I can't embarrass you all by recalling what that says. There is an advantage to the complexion, of which now is politically correctly called persons of color. And it is that we do not show our blushes easily. After court, Kenneth took me aside and said, Michael, you have experienced counsel in your chambers, and we are all colleagues when we are not against each other. Never be ashamed to ask questions, or you will never know or remember all of the law. I took that lesson to heart, and I believe became a better lawyer. Kenneth in court was both passionate and persuasive. His knowledge, particularly of the criminal law, was matched by his knowledge of human frailties. For the latter, he had an inexhaustible sympathy. Others will speak to our colleagues' triumphs in court and in politics. For myself, I will only say further that I never once saw Kenneth lose his temper or fail to give the time of day to a colleague, or fail to give full ocular appreciation to a member of the opposite sex. When I think of him, I shall remember the twinkle in his eye, the ready smile of his greeting, and the very genuine warmth of his friendship. To all of Kenneth's children and grandchildren and extended family, especially my dear friend Peter, and Kenneth's granddaughter Megan, who I have the privilege and pleasure of working with, I offer my most sincere sympathy. On behalf of the inner bar, I do the same. May your memories of a great man sustain you in the darkness of the night. I thank you.
Much, Mr. Gordon. I now call upon Mr. Thaddeus Anton to read the tribute of Mr. Anthony Astaphan, Sr.
Thank you, your leadership. Security protocols already established. This is a tribute from Mr. Astaphan, Tony Astaphan QC. I would like, first of all, to offer my most profound sympathies to the family of Kenneth Foster QC, and especially to my dear friend and brother, Peter Foster. I would also like to offer my condolences to St. Lucia and the Bar Association of St. Lucia and the OECS. Peter has lost his dad, and St. Lucia and the Bar are legend and an icon. There are few of us in the world who go through life without meeting the most special person, whose mere presence command your attention and respect. One such person was Kenneth Foster QC. I read of him before I met him. But the written word is wholly inadequate alternative to meeting and speaking with Kenneth in person. I found the reminiscences of his political battles and professional life experiences fascinating, especially the battles in and out of Parliament. His professional battles as counsel, whether in St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, or the BDI, are now well carved and settled in the history of St. Lucia and the OECS. However, what fascinated me most was Kenneth the man. I found him, despite his enormous reputation, to be a humble and warm human being. He was always willing to speak and listen. He would call or walk to Peter's old office in Castro's to sit and speak with him. He would talk for hours. During these wonderful conversations, I learned that Kenneth Foster QC also had quite a sense of humor. However, as I hope you will all appreciate, I cannot on this solemn occasion give any details or disclosure. Kenneth Foster QC would insist on inviting me for lunch. He was one of the very few elders who I knew who would do so with some frequency in council, who were his obvious junior in so many respects. Whenever Kenneth and I met, there was this ever-present captivating warmth and his command of his language. He was also interested in cases Peter or I would do. This takes me to the encounter I will never forget. Many moons ago, Peter and I were on different sides in a case in the High Court in Castries. In the course of the hearing, I happened to look to the door of the court and saw Kenneth shaking his finger. I assumed it was at me. I asked to be excused and went to meet Kenneth Foster. He immediately said, "What is going on here? You and Peter are on different sides." I replied, "Yes." His retort was, "I hope this is the last time," and immediately walked away. This was Kenneth Foster's way of saying that I was part of his umbrella of life, and so was Peter, his son. Therefore, there must be no friction among us. I have cherished this encounter as an honor and privilege since then. There is another encounter. This was during the cathedral murder trial. Within the first day of this trial, it became clear to me why Kenneth was a huge success at the criminal bar. Notwithstanding his age, Kenneth Foster QC represented those accused of murder. It was not an easy case in many respects for him. His command of his facts and law and cross-examination of the witnesses were lessons in motion. There are the times when members of the bar should be sitting in the High Court learning from a master of his trade. Also, he was also highly skilled at putting the facts to the jury. Most of the time, the jury's eyes were on him. However, it was his profound understanding of the law which left an indelible mark with him. At the beginning of the trial, Kenneth was accused came over to me as the counsel for the prosecution and explained to me that the laws of St. Lucia, the criminal code, provided for the defenses of insanity and delusion. I listened to him. I spoke to other counsel. No one was sure whether Kenneth was right. Then I read and reread the provisions of the code. I became convinced that Kenneth Foster QC was in fact right. I told him so. Consequently, I agreed in large measure with his submissions on the issue, both in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. The courts disagreed with Kenneth Foster QC. They were wrong. His vindication came shortly thereafter from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. My lady, if I may, I would like, with your leave, to say a few words to Peter. That's from Mr. Astaphan. Peter, I do not know exactly how you feel today, but I know the consequences of losing a life. I lost mine some time ago. It's not easy. Your pain and grief and that of your family must be unbearable. Be not afraid. Our dads are both no longer with us in body. However, as I said to you privately, we must. But bear this in mind. Your beloved father, Kenneth Foster QC, will always be part of your life. You treasured him as he treasured you during his life. The memories of him are alive and well. They will forever be in your soul and spirit, and part of your life until the very last day. Preserve and treasure them all. They are priceless. Share them with all who knew him not, especially the next generation of Foster family solution. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I now call upon the Honorable Stephen Julian, Attorney General of St. Lucia, to address the court.
Thank you, lady. With your leave, lady, I wish to adopt the order of protocol which has already been established and wish all assembled a good morning. Lady, I have the honor to rise to add the somber echo of tributes to our fallen colleague, Mr. Kenneth Foster, CBE, his counsel. He was born in the city of Castries on the 28th day of August 1930 from his mother Elsie and Mr. Ernest Foster, and demonstrated early promise as an exemplary student and athlete. Such was his aptitude and his parents, who in spite of the challenges of recovering from the widespread devastation wrought by the 1948 Castries fire, found the resources to support his decision to pursue legal studies in the United Kingdom. What followed after the successful completion of his studies, his admission to the Honorable Society of Lincoln Inn's Bar on the 23rd day of June 1955, and the St. Lucian Bar on the 22nd day of July 1958, was 6 decades of singular dedication to crafting an indelible reputation for excellence as a legal practitioner par excellence in St. Lucia and the wider Commonwealth Caribbean. Such was his pedigree in the halls of justice throughout the region that the
she's come back herself up.
That the news of his passing provoked several memorials from well-respected scribes. These include an article in the Trinidad Express dated June the 24th, whose headline simply read, "The lawyer who defended Abdul Malik has died." Therein, the reader is greeted to an image of a younger Kenneth Foster in his bib, gown, and wig.
looking ready and poised to vigorously defend the clients against his adversaries in the grand theater of the courtroom. To the average Trinidadian and international press corps of the early 1970s, there was no greater spectacle than our very own small island, pre-independence son, in the person of Kenneth Foster, rising to the occasion to represent Abdul Malik and the others in the trial for the murders of Joseph Skerritt and Leland Benson, who was the daughter of an English Conservative member of Parliament. Although Malik was found guilty of the murder of Skerritt and executed, the brilliance of that St. Lucian lawyer, a son of the soil, left its mark in the courtrooms of Trinidad and Tobago and reverberated throughout the region. So impressive was he that the balladeer Lord Kitchener found the inspiration to immortalize Malik's champion in the following line of the song, One to Hand, from the 1973 album, We Walk 100 Miles, and it goes as follows. Up jumped a lawyer from St. Lucia. Sir, with due respect, this witness and accomplice of the murder, I strongly object. The lady, I cannot vouch for the accuracy of Lord Kitchener's reporting, but I'm minded to believe that he certainly captured the spirit of the skilled orator in the person of Kenneth Foster. The lady, Kenneth Foster's appearances before the bench have been described by many as virtuoso performances that have been confirmed by those who preceded him. Undoubtedly, his composure and poise, his understanding of the law, his thorough knowledge of the case file before him, and his ability to process the law and think on his feet were attributes which made him a legend before the criminal courts. Though criminal law, as has been already articulated, may have been where his passion lay, he was an equally well-versed civil law practitioner and exponent of our civil code. Through the testimony of his pedigree can be found in the several forays at the bar and in the reports, the West Indies reports, for instance, in the several jurisdictions in the English-speaking Caribbean. The lady, many of us who are present at this sitting, especially members of the criminal bar, his memory will live on in the many lessons that could not be found in texts or taught at law school. Indeed, he was known to remain seated at the inner bar after his business of the day had been addressed, to practice the now lost art form of observing and advising on the actions at the bar. For me, this is where the moniker Papa F will forever resonate, as it was unexpected that a practitioner of such renown, of such stature, would have shown any interest in the activities of the neophytes. So true was he to the noblest tradition of his well-worn silk, that he was known to even mentor the police prosecutors of the day. This was during a period where training opportunities and reference material was scarce. He helped before the age of net neutrality, when access to practitioners' texts and legal material was restricted to but a few. The fact that he generously shared techniques and information which would ultimately be used in support of a submission to which he was opposed was secondary to his desire to nurture the growth of the practice of criminal law in his homeland. The lady, to his clients, he was that atypical attorney would see a matter through from the beginning to the end, from the arrest of an accused to the bail application into trial. Even after bail was secured, he would persist until that person had walked out of the old central police station something which I have witnessed and sought to emulate. And much to the chagrin of either the arresting officer or the officer in charge of whatever station it would be. Locally, he was a true exponent of the legal imperative that everyone is entitled to a fair trial. This he did at a time when we were less attuned to the value of protecting these rights. Our dear colleague would still choose to represent the interests of the accused even when the outcome looked bleak, or where citizens would be clamoring for more justice, as has been articulated earlier in the case of the Cathedral Massacre. He also understood that justice demanded that poor and marginalized citizens have access to legal representation. His chambers was in close proximity to those persons and their families, and he often served them the knowledge that there wasn't a remote possibility of settlement of his legal fees. Other times, as our brother Kenneth has already articulated, he graciously accepted farm produce in lieu of payment. The lady, the pro bono legal services by the likes of our brother Kenneth Foster and our fellow long deceased colleague Primrose Bledman was an invaluable national service and a precursor for what is now institutionalized as the legal aid office. I propose and I will advocate that the best way that we can honor their memory is by stopping the historic budgetary tokenism and make allocation which will fuel the proper functioning of the legal aid office. The lady, perhaps it was a natural progression for him as a man of the people to offer his service to country by entering the political arena. Through the years of 1967 to 1977, he served as political leader of the Sinusha Labour Party. He was also a member of the judiciary as a magistrate, the legislature as a member of parliament for ancillary canneries, the executive as acting prime minister, Minister of Communications and Roads between 1979 and 1982, Minister of Legal Affairs 1981 and 82, and for the period May 1981 to January 1982 as the island's second Attorney General. So he has served in the legislature, judiciary, and the executive. The lady recognition for the breadth of his work as a legal practitioner finally came when he was elevated to the status of Peace Counsel in 1994. He had to endure another 20 years to attract the award of Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, CBE, in 2014. This award came for exemplary services to his country in politics, the law, and the community. I am certain that as grateful as he was for the formal recognition for his efforts, that he was equally grateful for having earned the respect of the average Sinusha and inspired a generation to become attorneys at law. It is now left to me to express my profound condolences on behalf of the Attorney General's Chambers and the government and people of Sinusha to the family of Mr. Kenneth Foster C.E.C. on the passing of the patriarch of the family. The legal fraternity has lost a true luminary and the Sinusha statesman. His contributions will not be forgotten, and I am confident that Foster's legacy of excellence will endure through the succeeding generations. May our dear colleague and favorite son rest in perfect peace. There can be a no further assistance for lady, and I seek your leave to take this.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I would ask the President of the Bar Association of St. Lucia, Ms. Rennie St. Rose, to address the court.
The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. This, my lady, was a much-spoken quote of Henry Longfellow by Kenneth A.H. Foster, Q.C., a quote he lived by. I had heard stories of Kenneth Foster, Q.C. long before I met him. These were stories of a great advocate, the foremost criminal law attorney in St. Lucia and the wider region, a defender of the poor and vulnerable, a champion of the underdog. The stories told of a man who fought tirelessly and endlessly for his client, vehemently opposed to the death penalty, much like I was at the time, and I was in order. I will never forget the first time I saw Kenneth in action at a murder trial before the criminal court. The courtroom was crowded with spectators, and there was Kenneth, an actor on a court stage. His flamboyance, his oratory, and captivating performance were moments to behold. When he spoke, everyone listened, as if mesmerized. It was quite a sight, and I had no doubt that all I had heard was true. Kenneth Foster knew his people, he knew his jury, and he just seemed to always know what line of questioning to adopt. When I joined Peter's firm in 2003, I got to know Kenneth, and he became like family. And what I saw amidst the fame and success was a devoted family man, a man of humility, a genuine soul who loved and lived for the Lord and his family. The greatness and success of Kenneth was premised on hard work, dedication, and a commitment to the Lord. From my first day at the firm, I was schooled by Peter, as were all who walked through his doors, in what we know to be the Kenneth Foster lessons of a great advocate, which I later had the privilege to hear Kenneth say on many occasions. This is an honorable and august profession. It is an honor to be a lawyer. You must always represent your client without fear or favor. You get out of this profession what you put into it. The law is like a jealous mistress, second to none. The last quote I remember with fondness, as I can still hear Kenneth's charming voice saying this to me for the first time, as if it was yesterday. He was faithful to the law. Kenneth had a keen interest in passing on his knowledge, skills, and lessons to younger practitioners, and became a teacher and mentor to many. He preached thorough preparation and dedication. It was not about amassing wealth, but about doing the best for our clients, whilst remaining respectful to the court. Kenneth fought hard against the death penalty for his clients. He would file all applications possible before the date of execution or hanging of a convicted person. And of his over 160 murder cases, he was unsuccessful only on one occasion, and that was not for lack of trying. He spoke often in the highest regard and respect for St. Vincent Floside, one of our greatest legal minds, and felt he should be emulated by all attorneys with thorough preparation and dedication. He stressed that one should always prepare, especially before attending before our great judges of the Court of Appeal. Never mislead a magistrate or judge with a frivolous argument. One's reputation is the honesty held with the judiciary. Never object unless you have a proper ground for your objections. In preparing an appeal, predict every argument or posing question or issue that the Court of Appeal could raise to have the corresponding winning answer and argument. These Kenneth Foster lessons will live on with many of us forever, and we are grateful to him. Kenneth also contributed immensely to our jurisprudence. in both criminal and civil jurisdictions in this court and in the wider Caribbean. On 24th of February 2018, the Bar Association, at the instance of our former president, Mary Juliana Charles, recognized his contribution and that of our beloved Kenneth Montlazy QC for over 60 years at the bar. Our two Kenneths. Kenneth Montlazy QC remains a huge contributor to our bar and to me personally as president of the Bar Association up to this day. Kenneth Foster was not able to join us at the celebration, but most of his children and grandchildren in St. Lucia were present, and we were happy to have had the opportunity to celebrate and honor him and to express then what he meant to us. We commit to ensuring that his legacy remains with our bar and is built on. In fact, Kenneth has ensured this with the number of lawyers he has mentored and the generations of Foster lawyers now at the bar and to come. His sons, Peter I. Foster QC, who has been and continues to be a shoulder to lean on at the Bar Council and to me personally as president of the bar. Colin Foster, who never gives up a fight and reminds us continuously of the need to fight for underdogs. Marcus Foster, blessed memory, who left us too soon, but who we still brag about as one of the most talented advocates we have ever had at our criminal bar. His daughters, Deborah Foster, Marcus Foster, and Katina Foster. Kenneth's grandchildren, her Honor, Tamara Foster, Marcus and Andrew's daughter, of whom we hear only great things and who is now a magistrate of our court. Luke Foster, Peter's son, who works as a barrister in the UK and who does not hesitate to contribute when he's called upon. And our newest and not so new, Megan Jubilee, Deborah's daughter. We also have Fosters on their way to our bar. Tiana Foster, who is about to start bar school in September, and Makia Foster, who has recently decided on the career path in both Peter's daughters. Kenneth achieved an enormous amount in his lifetime and would be proud of his legacy that he has left. We are grateful for all he has done, and it is the man and not the career that will be sorely missed. He was loved by all of us at the bar, and we will remember him and speak of him with great fondness forever. On behalf of the members of the Bar Association of St. Lucia, I express my sincere condolences to the Foster family. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. I now invite Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, the President of the Organization of the Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Association, to make his presentation to the court.
Yes, thank you, milady. May it please, milady and milords, and may I adopt the protocol before me. I rise on behalf of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations, OCBA, to join with our colleagues of the St. Lucia Bar Association and indeed the chorus of voices throughout the region to pay tribute to one who has been aptly described as a true legend of the legal profession, the flamboyant and much revered Kenneth Foster QC, who passed away on June 8, 2020 at the age of 89. OCBA is a regional umbrella organization embracing bar associations throughout the Commonwealth Caribbean, from the Bahamas in the north to Guyana in the south, promoting human rights, access to justice, and the rule of law. Kenneth Foster QC was a regional man who lived the ideals of organizations like OCBA. He was out in the deep trenches, defending human rights, facilitating access to justice, not just for the rich and famous, but also for the man in the street. In the true spirit of the profession, provided pro bono services to many who just could not afford it, and rigorously and vigorously advancing the interests of his client in accordance with the rule of law. No wonder he has been described as a legend and trailblazer of the profession, contributing to our rich body of local and regional jurisprudence. Generally, the job of an attorney is very demanding and extremely challenging, with constant deadlines, urgent applications, and the need to manage high client expectations. Think, though, of the job of the criminal advocate like Kenneth Foster, who, in addition, faces an unforgiving, judgmental, and intolerant public, eager to avenge crime and literally calling for revenge against the perceived wrongdoers. For an angry public, especially in the face of a brutal, high-profile crime, who cares about the presumption of innocence and the fundamental rights of an accused to a fair trial? Justice for them must be swift, now, and brutal. In the late 1960s and early 70s, in the heyday of the glory days of Kenneth Foster, even more than today, the public despised lawyers for defending quote-unquote criminals, viewing such lawyers as defending the act rather than representing the interests of the accused to ensure that he or she receives a fair trial in accordance with constitutional standards. But Kenneth Foster was a true officer of the court and guardian of the Constitution who rose to the call of duty irrespective of the circumstances. In his criminal practice, he was guided by the constitutional edict that every person charged with an offense is entitled to a fair trial within a reasonable time by a competent and impartial court established by law. That's why he was able to represent the considered infamous Abdul Malik, charged for the murder not just of a local Trinidadian, but of the daughter of an English conservative MP in February 1972. The brutal killing sent shockwaves not only throughout Trinidad and Tobago, but the entire Caribbean after her body was discovered in a shallow grave. It was one of the most publicized trials in the history of the Caribbean, with daily updates from the proactive daily newspapers in Trinidad and Tobago circulated regionally. Abdul Malik, whose case went all the way to the Privy Council, was eventually executed in Trinidad and Tobago in 1975. In that case, like his many other cases, Kenneth Foster rose to the occasion and remained true to our code of ethics, which mandates that an attorney at law shall defend the interests of his clients without fear of judicial disfavor or public unpopularity, and without regard to any unpleasant consequences to himself or to any other person. It further mandates that an attorney at law shall always act in the best interest of his client, represent him honestly, competently, and zealously, and endeavor by all fair and honorable means to obtain for him the benefit of any and every remedy and defense which is authorized by law, steadfastly bearing in mind that the duties and responsibilities of an attorney at law are to be carried out within the bounds of the law. Such was the representation of Kenneth Foster in Council. Today, unlike the 1960s and 1970s, thanks to the work of local and regional bar associations like the OECS Bar and OGBA, the public, though still somewhat unforgiving, is much more conscious of the fundamental rights of an accused to a fair trial and to the role of defense counsel. We have to continue the public legal education while at the same time providing the necessary ongoing training to improve the quality of service of our colleagues at the criminal bar. Only recently, OGBA teamed up with the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago to share LAT's high quality, very practical 8-part criminal advocacy series throughout the OGBA jurisdictions. The response and feedback have been very positive, with the last session scheduled before the end of this month on trial techniques, to be delivered by long-standing and seasoned attorneys in Trinidad and Tobago. We urge aspiring criminal advocates to embrace these and other training opportunities offered by our bar associations. Whether as an advocate, magistrate, attorney general, criminal law tutor, politician, or sportsman, Kenneth Foster served St. Lucia and the region with distinction. He was a great orator, fearless advocate, and selfless humanitarian who was able to combine his wide-ranging skills to provide the best representation to his time. He has left a rich legacy, felt way beyond the narrow shores of St. Lucia, and captured in some of the law reports and other well-documented stories of his exploits within and outside the courtroom. We extend deepest condolences to the family of our dear departed colleague, Kenneth Foster, and to our colleagues of the St. Lucia Bar Association. To our dear friend, Peter Foster, Queen's Counsel, and the 8 other children and grandchildren of Kenneth Foster, now practicing law, we urge you to continue his rich legacy of service to community, nation, and region. We salute our fallen colleague who in 2018 had the rare and unique honor to celebrate 60 years at the bar. And may I, milady, with your leave, take the opportunity to salute his lifelong friend and colleague who also celebrated 60 years at the bar in 2018, one who I describe as the indomitable and evergreen Kenneth Monplaisir QC, who keeps going and going like the tireless energizer. The legacy of Kenneth Foster QC will continue to live on. May he rest in peace. May peace with us and ladies.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I call upon Mr. Thaddeus Antwine again, this time in his capacity as the president of the OECS Bar, to address the board.
Please ready. Protocols already established. I'm often reminded of the Hebrew proverb that says, "Say not in grief, he is no more, but live in thankfulness at the words." My lady, I rise this morning to say very brief words on the passing of a statesman, a teacher, a counselor, a public servant, a charmer, politician, a humanitarian, and simply a nice gentleman, a lovely soul, bearing the name Kenneth Thomas Foster of Queen's Counsel, who was born 9 years before the Second World War. I am thankful that he chose this legal profession of ours and was able to contribute to the jurisprudence of the Eastern Caribbean and the wider Caribbean in the way that he did. Although I did not practice before the criminal bar, I was able to see and appreciate his powers. Our interactions were limited to the times he came to attend to some civil matters, and also the times that we spent waiting hours upon hours for matters before the civil courts. And boy, did I learn a lot. You see, Kenneth Foster was a legal luminary, a legal legend, an enigma. You heard of him before you got to meet him. His name was part of the Rum Talk lexicon and indeed straight corner in the city talk of St. Lucia. One would have heard of stories of accused being so persuaded by the arguments of counsel that they were questioning themselves about whether or not they indeed committed a crime. One would have heard of wanted accused trusting no one but counsel to provide safe passage to police custody. One would have heard of counsel going to Trinidad, and we put it early on, the land of carnival and bacchanal, like himself, and end up in a Lord Kitchener song, One to Hand, singing about the man Foster from St. Lucia who came to Trinidad with his brilliant poetry skills, defending Captain Mali. There is so much that can be said about Kenneth Foster, QC, and which has already been said this morning, such as his corporate antics and his knowledge of the law, his mentorship in Trinidad Council, his political acumen. But what really comes to mind is his charm, that smile, his use of words and eloquence. Or his charm was not limited to him. He would coach young counsel on virtues of charm, not just for the courts, but also ladies. Oh yes, the ladies, he would say. He often said to me with a silky smile and wide-eyed look, Antoine, you must take care of the ladies. Treat them well. In my days, I took care of all of them. Finally, that is all I've been permitted to say here in this life. However, with your leave, my lady, I would like to take the liberty of adapting a song made famous by American singer Frank Sinatra. I do it my way, as I think it aptly describes the man Kenneth Foster QC that I know. And goes. And now the end has arrived. And so he has faced final curtain. My little friends, I'll say it clear. I'll state his case, of which I'm not so certain. But he has no doubt lived a life that's full. He traveled each and every highway, backwards too. And more, much more than this, he did it his way. Regrets, I'm sure he had a few. But then again, too few to mention. He would say he did what he had to do and saw it through without exemption. He tried planning each charted course, each careful step along the Bible, and more, much more than this, he did it his way. Yes, I'm sure there were times that he was sure he knew when he bit off more than he could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, like a man, he did it all in spite of it. He faced it all and stood tall, and did it his way. He has loved, he has laughed, and he has cried. He has had his fill, his share of losing. And now, as tears subside, he will find also music to think that he did it all that way. And he would say, not in a shy way, oh no, not him. He did it in his way. For what is a man, what has he got, if not himself, and he has not? See, the things he truly feels are not the words of one who kneels. The record will show he took the blows, there were many, I am told, but he did it his way. Yes, it's Kenneth Foster, QC's way. Counsel Foster, this giant of a man, surely did it in his own enigmatic way, and he will be missed. But his indelible imprint at the bar that spanned over 60 years and gave the politics of St. Lucia will continue to be part of the lexicon of St. Lucia while Caribbean and Commonwealth. We will all concur that his charm, wit, wisdom, and oratory at the bar will always be remembered. You say, take your candle and we'll light the world. On behalf of myself and indeed the ODC as well, I would like to extend my heartfelt condolences to the entire foster family and indeed our foster colleagues at the bar Association of St. Lucia. May Christ, who called you Kenneth, Augustine, Thomas Foster, take you to himself, and may the angels lead you to the host of the day. Amen. May peace and God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. I now ask Mrs. Mary Juliana Charles, the former president of the St. Lucia Bar Association, to address the court.
Good morning, ladies. The lady, may it please you, and with your leave, I would like to adopt the protocol already mentioned. A tribute to the memory of Kenneth Augustine Thomas Foster, QC, who departed this life on the 18th June 2020. Autrefois convie, which may be pleaded by an accused who has already been tried and convicted for the same offense. Autrefois acquis, which may be pleaded by an accused who has already been tried and acquitted for the same offense. These two definitions have resonated in my mind for several years, since 1989 to 1991. This was part of the lecture in criminal law given and emphasized upon by our lecturer, Mr. Kenneth Foster QC, affectionately called Ken Foster, at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, Montfortune, Castries, in the paralegal program, of which I was a student in 1989. His lectures on the subject of criminal law were delivered with much clarity and dedication. And even after his allotted lecture time, he still allowed himself to be engaged by students who were too timid to question him during class. I know of no student of the class of 1989 to 1991 who missed the pass mark under his guidance, even when the second marking was conducted by the Barbados Community College. He also taught civil law and practice in the same course. Undoubtedly, Ken Foster distinguished himself in the practice of criminal law in St. Lucia, and I reserve the right to boast that he ranked high among the Caribbean's best. He was an advocate of great eminence, possessed a quiet and courteous personality, yet he delivered his legal obligation with tremendous impact. His contribution to St. Lucia is well noted. Politician and legal luminary, with several offspring, including grandchildren, who chose to follow him in the legal profession. For me, high among his public accomplishments is the time he expended in teaching St. Lucian students in the paralegal program conducted by Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, despite his busy schedule. And this initiative certainly had a profound influence on my choice of profession as a lawyer. There are other of his students who became lawyers too. Numbered among them is a judge, and others, including the police commissioner, have since become holders of a degree in law. Whenever I visited him at his home, after his retirement from practice, he would ask, "How is the court these days?" Which made me aware that he had recognized his visitor. Thank you, my dear tutor. Thank you, my colleague. Sleep well. With deepest sympathy to all his children, grandchildren, and his family at the bar. May it please you, Marie.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Charles. I invite Mr. Alberton Richelieu to speak on behalf of the criminal bar.
May it please you, my lady, may I adopt the protocol as established from before. I must apologize for not being to be physically present, which I wish I was able to, but unfortunately because of my circumstances I'm unable to do so. However, it is indeed with a very heavy heart that I have to pay tribute to the celebration of the life of Mr. Kenneth Foster QC, affectionately called Ken, a legend in the criminal law unmatched by any criminal lawyer in St. Lucia, and one of the best in the entire Caribbean, who could have matched the criminal lawyers such as Carl Hudson Phillips QC, Trinidad and Tobago deceased, and Ian Ramsey QC deceased, both of whom I had the opportunity of seeing in action at the criminal bar in their respective countries and outside of the respective countries. Ken, as he was affectionately called, became my mentor from the year 1985, during which time I was attached to the firm of Monclesi & Company. I must say that Mr. Kenneth Monclesi QC guided me as my mentor in civil law, while Mr. Kenneth Foster QC guided me through the criminal law. I recall as a boy I was very interested in programs involving Perry Mason and Judge for the Defense. And I recall one time my father saying to me, "But you know, we have a Perry Mason in St. Lucia." And I said, "Perry Mason in St. Lucia?" He said, "Yes. There's this man called Mr. Kenneth Foster. You must try to follow him. I want you to be a man like him." At that time, there was the Voice newspaper, and the Voice newspaper carried a lot of the different court proceedings. And if I can recall, one of them that was carried, and I remember reading, was one involving a case where Mr. Kenneth Foster, not in a murder case, but was representing a lady by the name of Deborah Hatcher. She was a British national who was deemed a prohibited immigrant, and an executive order was made to deem her personal and grata in St. Lucia. In the execution of the order, Deborah Hatcher was taken to the Fiji airport and placed on an aircraft to St. Lucia. The lieutenant Ken Foster took it upon himself when he heard about it and went to the Fiji airport, found himself on the tarmac, into the aircraft, took Deborah Hatcher physically out of the aircraft, indicating that the executive order was illegal. This was done obviously at the expense of Ken being arrested for all kinds of charges, resisting arrest, assaulting police officer in the execution of the duty. However, he was successful in having Deborah Hatcher remain in St. Lucia, on St. Lucian soil. And of course, the charges against Ken became history. No one heard about it after that. And I also remember, and this was what really drove me more into the criminal law, when Mr. Kenneth Foster represented a man called Decay. Decay was charged for the killing of a man called Mr. Bill in a rum shop in Bedford. At the time, as public opinion would have had it, everyone thought that Decay was guilty of murder. But it was because it was believed that Mr. Bill was the proprietor of the shop and the killing was without justification. No doubt, as Mr. Ruggles Ferguson pointed out, with public outrage, etc., Decay was found guilty on a unanimous verdict and he was sentenced to hang. The determined Kent appealed, and the Court of Appeal found that there was sufficient provocation to reduce murder to manslaughter, and Kent was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. At that time when I read that article, I thought to myself, I would like to be a lawyer like Kenneth Foster. Then a few years down the line, there was the headline in the Voice newspaper, St. Lucian lawyer to represent Abdul Malik in Trinidad for the death of Jane Benson. I recall following the Voice very closely, and during the course of that trial, it was reported that Kenneth Foster had discredited the key prosecution witness Palmerston in a devastating fashion. However, it was also reported that Kenneth's life was threatened because there was public outrage in Trinidad at the time. Despite his strenuous and courageous efforts, Malik was found guilty, not because he did not do his best, but because, as was explained to me, there was other overwhelming evidence, and of course, no doubt, the Trinidadian public wanted to see the back of Abdul Malik. Now, at this point, it was said to me by Mr. Carl Hudson Phillips at QC in 1992, when I was conducting a trial in St. Vincent and Grenadines at the time when Mr. Carl Hudson Phillips QC was the prosecutor. And he indicated to me that Mr. Kenneth Foster at the time was a criminal lawyer who was unmatched almost throughout the Caribbean. Now, it was always my dream to meet this Mr. Kenneth Foster in person at the time. Then the time came when I attended the St. Mary's College together with his sons Peter and Colin. And one morning I was standing at the bottom of the Vintage Stretch when this brand new Toyota Mark II, registration number 1606, I'm sure Peter and Colin will remember that, stopped to give me a ride. Peter was sitting in the front and Colin was sitting in the back. I got into the back seat of the car. I knew I was being driven by the legendary Ken Foster. Chills came down my spine. I knew from then on this was the lawyer in St. Lucia I wanted to innovate and follow in his footsteps. I recall when I got home that afternoon, I was so elated and had to express to my father that Kenneth Foster, the legendary, gave me a ride. Thereafter, of course, I went to the University of the West Indies. And during the course of my criminal law course, I came across the following cases. And one of the hallmark cases that was reported in the 11 West Indian reports was James Jagannath and the Queen, found at page 350. At that time, in St. Lucia, under section 176 of the criminal code at the time, was that you had to, the mens rea for murder was an intention to cause death. Jagannath was found guilty of murder at the trial before Justice Bishop. Ken Foster at the time argued that the law of St. Lucia is that you had to show an intention to cause death, and the intention to cause grievous bodily harm had no place in St. Lucian criminal law. There were cases, other cases he did like Juliet and the Queen, found at 13 West End reports, at page 66. On a case of self-defense in which Ken argued that the counter-attack and the proviso of section 55 of the then criminal code was not properly put to the jury. The Court of Appeal upheld his arguments and allowed the appeal. There were other cases as well. Lesmore versus the Queen, and that was to show the determination that Ken had when he appealed on 3 occasions to the Court of Appeal in Lesmore versus the Queen, numbers 1, 2, and 3, all found at 10 West Indian reports ranging from pages 257 to 460. When I was admitted to the bar in 1985, I tried my best to join the chambers of Foster, and Foster, but at the time to no avail. But I got the opportunity to work with Kenneth Complete QC, and of course I'm not regretting up until this day, because I still took the opportunity to attend the criminal assizes to see Ken in action. The first opportunity I got to see Ken in the criminal trial of Canis Lando, where the allegation by the prosecution was that the defendant killed a man called Cushion in cold blood in the graveyard of Chosin Road Street. The defendant was found guilty and sentenced to hang. As per usual, then the criminal court was packed to capacity to see Ken in action. After the trial, I remember going to Ken to see how he felt about the verdict. And he said to me, this is my advice to you. Never give up until the last one is over. Ken then appealed, and this is found at Lionel and the Queen, Criminal Appeal number 6 of 1981, and argued, despite the fact that on the prosecution case it would appear to be cold-blooded murder, however, though the trial judge failed to put the defense of premeditated provocation to the jury, that is, provocation by the deceased to the defendant days preceding the murder, since this was never put to the jury, the appeal was allowed and manslaughter was substituted. Thereafter, my dream came true, where I actually appeared on behalf of defendants and appellants in association as junior Kenneth Foster QC. There, I found that the knowledge he imparted of me was invaluable and is something I am grateful for until I die. It has left this indelible mark in my mind. The cases which I can recall were the Queen and Gabriel Philip, which we did a trial, where the defendant was acquitted. I did the case along with him of the case of police and Bonnie Clark, the unlawful possession of $120,000 worth of jewelry where there was an acquittal. And this was an interesting case where I had the experience with Ken, in that Ken actually sat in to the case and allowed me to virtually conduct the case all by myself. He said, I'm there to protect you, you can go ahead. And as a matter of fact, that case was presided by who is now Justice Lauren Williams, who then was the magistrate who decided the matter. I also appeared in other matters, one of which is the Junior Vidal et al. Versus the Queen, appeal number 1 to 10 of 1993, a case which is popularly known as the Double case. And this was a case in which there were about 45 charges. The defendants at trial were found guilty of about 36 of those charges. And on appeal, at least, they were acquitted on 33, and terms of 15 years of imprisonment was reduced to 5 years. I must say I gained quite a lot of knowledge and experience and a way to handle criminal appeal trial. I must say that Ken was a legend, a trailblazer, whose ability to practice and his success in criminal law is unparalleled in St. Lucia and even in for a very long time. Other than the practice of criminal law, I got to know Ken personally. He was very jovial, charming. He loved all his children and got to the point where there were occasions he would say to me, I consider you my son because we worked on so many cases together. In fact, as I said that, I just remember when I saw Madam Justice Indra Hariprasad.
We seem to have lost Mr. Oshinwu for a while.
Am I there?
Yes, we can hear you again, Mr. Oshinwu.
Well, I was saying about Magistrate Indra Hariprasad Charles. At that time, Magistrate Indra Hariprasad Charles had seen so many adjournments in the matter that she turned around and she said, look, this is the final adjournment. Of course, it was past 9 minutes to 10 and Ken had not arrived. When Ken arrived, he said, what is she saying? I said, boy, let me tell you something. We're in a lot of trouble because she go throughout the case. Ken said, okay, don't worry, I believe you support me. I said, I cannot support you, I'm representing the defense. Ken came in and then he started to address Magistrate Indra Hariprasad Charles at the time. Then he started with this thing, but yes, my lady, yes, my lady, yes, my lady. Magistrate Indra Hariprasad Charles, as she then was, said, look, let me tell you something, I'm very upset with you. What about my lady? Oh, madam, it seems that this is a sign of good things to come. You will soon become a judge. So everybody, of course, burst into laughter. The adjournment was granted. A few years later, I appeared against Ken before Madam Hariprasad Charles. He said, see what I told you? I know that you will become a judge. Such brilliance. And that was the kind of man that Ken was. Other than that, Ken and I must indicate, it is no coincidence at this point in time that two of Ken's great grandchildren, Ivanka and Paris, are also my grandchildren. So it is also a family sort of arrangement that we had. With this, Kenneth was a husband foster QC dearly. I miss him dearly. He really influenced and shaped my life as a criminal practitioner and the life of many other criminal practitioners, including Mr. Anthony McNamara QC, Mr. Leslie Mondesi, Mr. Lon Theophilus, Mr. Alfred Alcide, Mr. Sean Innocent, now judge, and Mr. January Walters. On behalf of the Criminal Bar Association and Bar as a whole, we wish to extend our deepest condolences to the family of Mr. Kenneth Thomas Augustine Foster QC, who will be deeply missed, especially the guidance we received from him in the conduct of our criminal trials with me. May the soul bear the King and Master of the criminal world, St. Lucia, rest in perfect peace. I thank you. If you have anybody, that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oshinu. I now call upon Justice Georges Taylor Alexander to address the court.
Thank you. Good morning to all. On behalf of my brothers and sisters on the bench and throughout the High Court of the OCS, I wish to extend our most sincere condolences to the children, family and friends of Kenneth Foster QC. From all accounts, he was beloved and respected as a father and a committed family man. He is not personally known to many of the judges who now occupy the bench of the OCS, as his legal career ebbed over 10 years ago, wearied perhaps by the demands of being a sole practitioner, of the long hours and the uncompromising demands of the mistress that is the law. Those of us who knew him remember him to be humble, charismatic, and of gregarious spirit. His reputation always had preceded him, and his legacy on the landscape of St. Lucia remains. He devoted a reasonable share of his life to doing his duty in the political sphere and in the development of his country. A former Attorney General and Minister of Government, and as Acting Prime Minister of St. Lucia. His legacy is also etched in our regional landscape, as his criminal practice, as we have heard before, extended from Trinidad in the south to the British Virgin Islands in the north. Recalling in particular his defense of Michael Abdul Malik in Trinidad, of which speakers before me have highlighted. Malik gained notoriety in 1972 for the death of Gail Benson and for the killing of Joseph Skerritt. It was for the killing, of Joseph Skerritt that Malik was eventually hanged in 1975, and not for Gail Benson. But Kenneth Foster's representation of Malik was spoken of long after the trial ended and Malik was hanged. We understand our colleague to have been ailing for some time, the sun setting on his life on the 18th of June 2020, when he fought no more forever. We urge his family to find comfort and solace in the life that he lived and in the legacy he established, and in the many numerous warm memories that he must surely have left. It is well known that he loved each of his children, living and deceased, and loved each of them specially. We want to convey our condolences, particularly to Colin, Peter, Regina, Andra, to Magistrate Tamara Foster, Luke and Megan, and may I, on behalf of my family and me, convey personal condolences to Terry Foster and family. May the soul of Kenneth Foster rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Taylor Alexander. I now call on Justice Sean Innocent.
Morning, my lady. With your permission, to adopt the protocol already established. Unfortunately, I do not see myself being in a position to chronicle the life of Kenneth Augustine Loomis Pastor, as those speakers before me have. However, what I can do is chronicle my life with him, from the point of view that every fond memory that I have of him has somehow motivated me to say that insofar as he was a man who was very steeped in the traditions of this profession, that perhaps if he were here, then he would echo the very words and sentiments that perhaps I think would be fitting to communicate this morning. When I was, as Justice Indra Hari Prasad Charles indicated, very young at the time, and I believe I may very well have been the youngest male practitioner to have been admitted to the bar in St. Lucia. In those times, and I believe Justice Taylor Alexander will recall, so with Justice Kimberly Snack-Fulgens, Justice Vicky Ann Ellis, nearly all the legal practitioners were very senior legal practitioners. We were quite fortunate to have the benefit of that, and I think it is now very well reflected in what we see, not only on the bench, but at the bar today. Unfortunately, those days when the hallmarks of the profession were revered seem to be waning away. And now, having taken on the mantle of sitting on the bench, it has become more obvious to me, particularly in light of the fact that we have lost those hallmarks, that the experience that I had of having a teacher that basically enabled you to pass the rites of passage that you ought to in this profession. Those days no longer exist. Now, they come fresh out of law school, and they hang up their shingles, and they appear at the bar, not steeped in the traditions of the law. That is my memory of Kenneth Foster, QC. That when I had lost all confidence as a legal practitioner, having walked out of the Court of Appeal, losing my first murder appeal, he held my hand and he said, "I feel sorry for you. In a profession like this, you must go about it all on your own." The following day, I was walking in the parking lot of the old courthouse, and again he held my hand and he said, "Come with me." Well, I did not know what I was going to do, but that was the first murder case that I did with Kenneth Foster, QC. And I was taught to listen and be humble. And I got to observe him throughout the entire trial. And I said, I want to adopt that style. I want to adopt that charisma. And from then I learned that you do not argue your witnesses. No. Your cross-examination is a conversation. that you gain the confidence of the jury. And my next case with Kenneth Foster QC was the infamous case of the cathedral murders. And again, it's quite emblematic of the keeping of the ancient hallmarks of the profession. Because when I appeared in the matter, Justice Indra Hariprasad Charles, in full view of the entire panel of jurors and all the observers and the media, said, "Mr. Innocent, are you in this case?" I was completely and entirely stunned and flabbergasted. Not permitting my passions to overcome at the time, Kenneth Foster QC said, "Milady, perhaps this is a good time for us to repair to chambers." And we went into chambers, and Justice Indra Hariprasad Charles was quite flustered at the time. And I recall her saying, I have no recollection of having assigned you to this case. At that moment in time, I was beginning to wonder, what sort of mental illness was I laboring under to have thought that I would have risen up in court and say, "I am here." By the time Kenneth Foster had basically used his charm, Justice Indra Hariprasad Charles suddenly had a recollection that I had been assigned to the matter. And the message I want to send is this, that those were the ways that squabbles, whether it be among lawyers or between bar and bench, were handled. It wasn't handled by talking the judge outside the courthouse or writing spurious missives about the judge's courtroom to various places. No. We settled our squabbles among ourselves so as not to erode the integrity of the justice system or the due administration of justice. That there will be no hint of impropriety in the eyes of the general public. Unfortunately, those days are over. Kenneth Foster was the kind of man, if he knew that any, particularly a junior legal practitioner, had fallen into him or had found himself in danger, he would be the first to pick himself up and find that practitioner and try to resolve the issue. Not to bring him down, to destroy him. Because Kenneth Augustine, Dennis Foster QC, always felt that if any one of us bring anyone or any other member of the profession down, we are not just bringing that member of the profession down, we're bringing every other member of the legal profession down. And that is the legacy of the man that I will never forget. In any event, the matter of the cathedral case went to the Court of Appeal. And I recall on Sunday afternoon, the Court of Appeal was sitting in Monday. I get a phone call from Kenneth Foster QC. Counsel, trying to prepare some grounds of appeal quickly, eh? If you need me, I'll be at Barnard Hill or Bishop's Gap. Well, the great Kenneth Augustine Thomas Foster asking me to prepare grounds of appeal in a case of that magnitude. Well, I left home at 5 in the afternoon, left the office at 5 in the morning after typing up all the grounds of appeal. Waited patiently downstairs the courthouse for Kenneth Foster QC. He was late, of course. And then I handed him the papers. He said, "Do you have any manila envelopes?" Someone went, "Who is he talking about?" Manila envelopes. He placed skeleton on and the additional grounds of appeal in separate manila envelopes and handed them to the registrar and said, could you please give this to the judges, please? By that time, I'm shaking and quivering in my boots after a recollection of having been properly slaughtered by Justice Sir Dennis Byron, Justice Sataran Singh, and of blessed memory, Justice Albert Ray. I said, no, but this is not the way. And then eventually I realized having silk actually brought you some privileges. But in any event, we were unsuccessful on the appeal. And I had felt that Mr. Foster had given up. So I had gone further and taken the matter to the Privy Council. Of course, the Privy Council had allowed the appeal and remitted it to the Court of Appeal of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. And I said nothing to Mr. Foster. And I went ahead and did the remittal myself. And I recall meeting him in the corridor of the old courthouse and him saying to me, yes, you're taking over. Well, I said nothing and I smiled and moved on. And I recall distinctly the last occasion that Mr. Kenneth Augustine Thomas Foster sat at the inner bar in the criminal jurisdiction of the High Court, sitting as the Court of, well, the criminal jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal, where he had represented a gentleman in a High Court trial, and he had lost, and I had taken on the appeal. And the appeal centered around good character, where it was evidence of good character had come out in the course of the proceedings in the court below. And the case of Tilak and the Queen had just been delivered by the Privy Council. And I was arguing all sorts of grounds of appeal and skirting around that. And I will never forget then Dennis Byron looked at me and said, are you stupid? And I smiled. Then he turned it around and said, do you think that we think that you are stupid? And I smiled. But then I remembered something. Learn to listen and be humble. I was not offended. But I kept staring at Kenneth Foster QC, who was hunched over at the end of it. And it was difficult to say. And I had to say to him, the appeal, that due to the ineptitude of the council and the court of people, the most difficult words I ever had to say in my life, while he sat there hunched over. And it dawned on me that time that there will come a time where it will happen to all of us, that after your true and faithful service, there will come a time when you must bow out. However, unfortunately, the criminal bar of St. Lucia has been without silk since then. And that is the clarion call that I wish to leave the members of the criminal bar. Because now we are at this time, the last of the 300 has departed. We no longer have that caliber of man to whom, no matter how many times we stumble on the road, no matter how many times that we have faced challenges, that we are always called upon his memory. Whether it be Mr. Albert Mitchell, John Walters, all those who were present when he was active at the prison. It is to him that we turn for support, whether it be from his memory, from what he had taught, but we no longer have that. And finally, the point that I wish to make is this, that when I joined the bar and I started my sojourn with Mr. Foster, I did not realize at the time that I was joining a family, which over time became affectionately known as the Fostonian School of Law. Because then, I would also meet another woman, his son, Marcus Peter Foster, who also became a very close friend, and colleague, and guide, and teacher. And ultimately, I was blessed from the point of view that I was able to distill from both of them qualities which I was able to apply in my practice, which has steered me well. Most of all, I'd like to extend my deepest condolences to the members of the Foster family who throughout the years have been very supportive. And I know that he will be missed, but he can find comfort in cherishing the memory of a very great man who I hope one day someone will rise to the challenge and properly chronicle and read his life. My lady, I would like to thank you, and also I would like to pray for the benefit of your kind indulgence in permitting me, perhaps, not to have adopted the style of those speakers who have gone before. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Justice Innocent. I wish to add my voice to all that has been said. I did not have much personal contact with Mr. Kenneth Foster, QC. I did meet him and briefly worked with him when he was in the British Virgin Islands. But like most of us, I first heard the name with that infamous Abdul Malik trial. And I'm a Trinidadian, so we pronounce the word Malik, not Malik. And I know I heard this morning many people speak about, and I think it was Mr. Ferguson, the anger against Abdul Malik was very high in Trinidad around that time. I was but a child, but I still remember it very well. And one of the things that caused a lot of anger in that matter was the fact that, and there were two calypsos that came out of that. There was another one, very more popular perhaps than one to hand, Parmesan. And Parmesan was one of the other witnesses to what had happened. And his evidence was that Neil and Benson came outside on the morning in question and saw them digging a hole. Stanley Abbott and somebody else was digging a hole. And she asked them, what was the hole for? And it is reported that the evidence was that the answer that came was, it is for you. And I think that sent many a chill down the spine of those who heard it. But Mr. Foster clearly had made his name because there were many eminent lawyers in Trinidad who could have been retained for that case, but Mr. Foster's reputation in the Eastern Caribbean clearly spoke volumes for itself, that he was the one who was chosen, among others, to represent Abdul Malik. Clearly, he lived a full life. Clearly, the Foster name, not only through him personally, but through his children and grandchildren, will continue to live on in the legal fraternity in this country. The Foster name, I think, is synonymous with law. I don't think anybody can argue with that. I wish to add my own voice to the voice of my fellow judges, along with the staff of the High Court Registry, and as we extend our sincerest condolences to the Foster family on their loss. May the soul of our legal brother rest in eternal peace. I will request that a transcript of this and recording of these proceedings be made and presented to the family of the late Mr. Foster PC, so that they will have a memory of what his colleagues at the bar have thought of him and what they said about him. I think it is only fitting that that be done. I will end by borrowing the words used by Mr. Thaddeus Antwine of all the things I have heard about Mr. Foster this morning and before. Indeed, he did it his way. Unless there is anything else any other business that we have, I think we can bring this special sitting to an end. Is the bailiff available?
Yes, I'm there.
Mr. Reynolds, we are getting a terrible echo.
This special sitting now stands adjourned, CBE.
Thank you, everyone.
This special sitting now stands adjourned, CBE.
Everything I got.